From Santa Rosa, California, this is 19 Stories. I'm Cheryl Halling.
Disinformation is spreading.
There will be a surprise outbreak. Is the issue of pandemic.
No social distancing at all.
They said that they would express their concerns about the mask supply.
Where's the mask? Where's the glove?
A second wave is
we all need some good news.
A message for all the healthcare workers out there.
Thank you.
If you're looking for hope tonight, raise your hand. If you feel alone and don't understand, if you're fighting the fight of your life, then stand.
My guest today may sound very familiar to you, and for good cause. For over the past 3 decades, he's been in your ears one way or another. Whether you've been watching television or listening to the radio, chances are you've heard Thom Pinto's voice. He's been using his dulcet tones in everything from the introspective storyteller for Audi, an everyman for AT&T Uverse, a whimsical poet on Clorox, and a fun-loving retro announcer for Fuze Tea. As a narrator, he is a familiar voice on cable documentaries that air on the History Channel, Discovery, the Weather Channel, CBS All Access, and the Smithsonian Channel. Since 2007, Thom's been a promo voice for CBS This Morning, 48 Hours, and the CBS Evening News. He's also been the signature promo voice in my neck of the woods for KRON TV San Francisco since 1995. Thom is also a revered coach to hundreds of working voice actors in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and across the country through the VO Roadshow. He shares his secrets of his success and love of voice acting through his Colors of Your Voice coaching technique that he crafted to bring out the specific emotion needed for each project and steer clear of generic performances. Given he is the only one I know that can give spam sex appeal, it's safe to say that he's mastered what he preaches. With that, I'd like to welcome Thom Pinto to 19 Stories.
Oh, I actually do like spam. I mean, I guess I will cop to it. So maybe that's why I booked that particular audition once upon a time. But thank you, Cheryl.
You do. Oh, that's wonderful. I just remember spam from when I went camping, and it was always spam and corned beef hash is what we had for
college finals. It was spam and hash in the morning. If you had an 8:00 final, your roommates get your arse up there and get it going, and then you had a little something to take a 2-hour final. That's my recollection of, believe it or not, probably the last time I had spam. But if somebody put it in front of me today, I'd go, yeah, I'll give it a shot again. Why not?
They have so many flavors now. I mean, it really is kind of a cult. There's a whole website for every type of spam you could ever imagine. But
and Hawaii, I understand, is like Ground Central.
Spam Central.
That's better.
What? But did you have Tang with your spam?
No, I think even as a kid, I think I had the Tang once or twice and just said, you know what, if we don't have orange juice, I'll just pass on this.
Yeah, don't blame you.
Yeah.
Well, how are you doing today on this beautiful, warm spring day, Thom?
Well, we both live in areas that I think, we're surrounded by this time of season, beauty, flowers, vines. In my particular neck of the woods, I can't believe the number of olive trees that are growing along Interstate 5 and olive oil bars. But spring is my favorite time of year aesthetically because, I get out there and I have little putts in the garden more and trim that. And you see the all the colors come to life. So right now I'm enjoying it. But other than the fact that, like you said, I think it is getting a little warmer.
Let's inform our listeners for a moment that you and I are neighbors of sorts and that you live in Stockton, California, which is in Northern California, and you're inland about 100 miles southeast from me. So we're sharing similar weather, and with that sometimes, because we have official fire seasons. So
I know.
That's the only thing that concerns me.
Yeah, and you know what? College roommates both moved to Santa Rosa out of college eventually. Both lived there, and one has moved out of that area, but one still lives there, and it's not once, but twice. He and his family have had to evacuate in Santa Rosa because of the fires, but thank God, knock on Orlex soundproofing, they survived. And like 2 blocks away, poof. But it's a gorgeous, It's gorgeous. It's my favorite part, and I'm a native Angelino. It's my favorite part of California. I don't care what anybody says. I think
It's divine.
Sonoma, Napa, it's God's country.
Thank you for saying that, because I always refer to it as that. And, my first time that I moved up here, because I'm also originally from Los Angeles, so you and I were probably neighbors then too, although I think you're originally from Van Nuys, correct?
I actually copped to being from Van Nuys. I'm okay with that. Yeah.
You're from Van Nuys, Van Nuys, Van Nuys.
That old joke that they used to tell.
Yes. Why don't you tell it, please? Give it justice.
No, it's because, well, you know what? When you're an Italian, the type of thing, he says the Italian settler, came over Mulholland Drive, looked out into the San Fernando Valley, and he said, Van Nuys. And there you go.
See, I heard it from it was a Jewish settler.
Probably would work better. Work better. So we'll do a rewrite on that.
6 of one, half a dozen of the others. But you are a Southern California boy, and I want to just say that I love that you describe yourself as a voice actor at any functioning microphone. By your intro, you obviously found a lot of functioning microphones, Thom. But I'm curious, how did you go from graduating with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology at UCLA, speaking of Southern California,
right,
to having this long and illustrious career in voiceover?
Well, the degree was a shill. No, I mean, you know what happened is that I went there and I wanted to be a journalism major, and then they said, no, we don't really have journalism major until grad school, but in the meantime, you can do this and that, and they had a communications major, and by the time my junior year was about ready to roll around, they said, we're going to cancel that program. So I was in a situation where I still wanted to get my degree, and it's like, well, what can I do based on the breadth requirements that I've taken, all these other classes? What would be the shortest distance to a degree? And it turned out to be psychology, which made sense because of so many classes about perception and human memory and things like that. And so that's what I ended up doing. But all along, I had been working at the college radio station there at UCLA, and like several other people who had come before me, who had gone into radio, major market stuff, like Bill Pearl, who was on KHJ, Ken Levine, who was on 10Q. Both of them graduated also from radio to become very successful TV writers. But that's kind of like where I got my training, and I wanted to be in radio. I wanted to be a morning man, and that's what I started doing. But very quickly, within a few years, I was so tired of saying, and here are the Bee Gees, because,
Yes.
it just, the whole fun, the life had been sucked out of it. But I enjoyed production. So when the production manager job opened up and they said, you sure you want to take yourself off the air? I said, well, I'll take that Saturday morning shift that, if you need to, so I can play around having fun. But I'd rather write and cut spots. And I really enjoyed cutting spots, doing different voices, or just doing, how I'm going to say is, non-radio style voices. So it would sound a little different. And that kind of got me more into VO, even though I wanted to do animation. I mean, really in the back of my mind. But it's very funny because I sent a tape to, a reel-to-reel tape to a friend's father. It was Jeff Prescott, and his father was Norm Prescott, who was head of creative at an animation company in the San Fernando Valley that did He-Man and a few others. And he said, you've got some great little characters on here, but, I really loved your natural voice on that one character you did. And what was interesting is that was the first cartoon I booked. I booked the lead as a hero on a cartoon called Pawpaw Bears, and it was like just
Really?
a very, very younger version of me.
I didn't know that. That's so cool.
Yeah, so I got a chance to do some of that, but basically my money right away, people were saying, "Hey, you're no Frank Welker," and that's really not a put down because Frank Welker is brilliant. Frank Welker or Michael Bell or Lenny Weinrib, and these were giants of the animation industry. They go, but you sure do have the right sound for young promos. And so I kind of backed into doing young movie trailers, 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, Say Anything, John Cusack movie, with the boombox thing.
All great films.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was kind of, and then I would also be doing a lot of promos for You're From LA, for KABC, for a show that was called INLA.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Oh, I didn't know that.
So there were, so I kind of took that route, and then voice matured, started maturing. Okay, we want you to do this now, or you're too old to do this, you're too young to do that. Suddenly I found myself doing news promos at KABC when my buddy Bill Ratner was out for like 5 months because he had back surgery. And so I really worked on my news channel chops. And then that was about a year and a half later. The creative director for KABC moved up to San Francisco. He was at KRON, and he hired me.
Isn't that fortuitous and wonderful, those connections?
Letting, you know what, I have to, everybody talks about you have to be in charge of your own destiny, and I believe that. But I also think you need to know the signs. When somebody's pointing you in a certain direction, when the universe is pointing you in a certain direction. And I've been there ever since. 5 different creative directors have left, and I've still stayed. And I'm, again, knocking on RLX soundproofing. I've been very fortunate to continue to work there. I love voicing for the Bay Area because, I feel like it's not around the corner, but I still feel like it's home for me.
I really appreciate you speaking to your early days in radio. And what's interesting is KLA is still there. I mean, they've been there since like 1962. I think one of the longest running college stations.
Okay, because so that's got to open up my question for you. I'm going to flip the tables. So you were there too at one time?
No. I lived in LA, but I mean, when I looked at KLA, I realized that it's still there. The station I cut my teeth on in LA is in Santa Monica, KCRW. There's a lot of people who've come through there.
I miss KCRW. I used to love Morning Becomes Eclectic
yes.
Because even if they played 3 songs, and even if I didn't like 2 of them, it's like the third one would be like, now this was different. And who was this? That was a terrific, and other stuff that they did as well. It was a terrific station.
I only mention it in the context of radio in Los Angeles, but the reason I'm so happy you touched upon your early days in radio is when I read that about you, and I think of your career and where you're at now and your body of work. I've heard numerous times people say that radio is the kiss of death for those entering voiceover. And you did mention about the non-radio voice. And there is a difference. If you start in especially AM radio or very commercial radio, it's hard to break that. But I'm wondering if you felt like cutting your teeth on radio helped you introduce the skill sets that you went to use in voiceover.
They did. And also because it was really I'm just going to say, not the Paleozoic era of broadcasting, but I'm just going to say that from a voiceover standpoint, my first agent was a woman, may she rest in peace, by the name of Donna Lee Davies. And she signed me, I was either 1979 or 1980. At that point, Cheryl, being an announcer was not a bad thing. As a matter of fact, there were people who would say to me, you're not announcery enough. So it's like, I worked in radio long enough to get a sense of, I'll tell you what I got, a sense of a 30 and a 60-second rhythm. Okay. I'm also a pretty decent writer. So I was able to kind of like look at a script and break it down because as a writer, I had to break down scripts for years, commercial scripts. But I got out of radio soon enough because wearing the headphones all the time does reinforce a little bit of that elongation of the vowels. Because technically speaking, there is an ever so slight delay between the words coming out of our mouth to what we hear in our headphones, which is why so many people say, I sound so much better in headphones. Well, you probably sound better because you're enjoying it. It's sponging into the airwaves a little bit there. But getting off topic here, I'm just saying that radio training was not all bad in terms of performing as performing. For example, the late Jay Thomas was a terrific morning man. Did he sound like a DJ? Occasionally he sounded a little broadcastery, but he was funny, and funny is funny is funny. And then you had guys like, Charlie Van Dyke. Charlie Van Dyke would sound like this and all that, and he was a good morning man there too. But, he had the quote unquote voice. But an old friend of mine, John Leader, who was on KHJ for many years, John had a deeper voice, but he didn't have a typical deep voice. He didn't have your typical, booming, this is WLS. John Leader had this mid-range, and still does, even though he's retired, he had this mid-range kind of thing. And suddenly he took a workshop with someone and they said, you should work on your Tim McIntyre. And he said, well, who's Tim McIntyre? And they played him a tape. And Tim McIntyre sounded like no one else because he had resonance, but he had more of a dramatic kind of wispy thing. And John Leader signed with Sutton Barth Venari about 2 or 3 months after I did. And suddenly John was on so many movie promos. I mean, he had a 2-decade run that was phenomenal. I know everybody talks about Don LaFontaine, and yes, he had a great run, but John was one of those guys. You had Don LaFontaine, you had Peter Cullen, you had Mark Elliott doing the Disney stuff, and then you also had John Leader doing so much stuff for Universal. Did he have bad radio habits? Yeah, but not so bad that he was, you see, the problem is that John's problem, he didn't have the problem of loving the way he sounded. Whereas some guys, they just keep, hey, Tom, I want to get into voiceover like you, and I understand there's a lot of money to be made. And it's like, did they take the word made and they turn it into 3 syllables? Yes. So can it be the kiss of death if you don't learn to act? And I was lucky that I was in a workshop, my beginning workshop that I was in with Kiva Lawrence and a guy by the name of Dick McGarvin. And Dick pulled me aside after about 3 or 4 workshops, and I was learning a lot, but he says, how would you like to be an alternate in our Tuesday night group? And I said, what's the Tuesday night group? He says, well, it's a group of working people, and we get together, and, we do already have a younger voice, but how would you like to be the alternate younger voice? And I said, sure. And it would happen every once in a while that I would get a chance to go in there, and boy, I was able to learn from all these other people that were in there. Like,
what a training ground.
It really was. I am telling you, it's like people directing you and telling you to do this, and the guest directors that would come in. So what was great is that Kiva was the one who said, Tom, it's okay to say the A word. I said, what do you mean? She goes, it's okay to be an actor. Actor's not a bad word, And now let's look at the way things are now, Cheryl. Everybody says, oh, no announcers. We want actors. Please, no announcers, just want actors. And that's 40 plus years ago, where things really maybe were starting to just barely evolve and push forward into more natural sounds.
And I want to speak to that. I actually had planned on asking you that a little bit later on. And I do want to talk about how your degree maybe played into moving into the realm of acting, moving into voiceover, because you're kind of stepping out, quote, in the real world and dealing with a lot of different people and acting and this whole creative outlet. And I'm curious if your degree helped you in working in this industry and understanding maybe some of the blocks or fears that maybe you might have faced, or now with the students that you work with or have worked with over the years.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't want, because I could go on and on and on, but the number of times that I am coaching someone and I will use something from my psych background, and then the following phrase comes out of my mouth. And right now, my mother in heaven is very happy because, when she realized that I was getting a degree, but going into radio, it was like, why are you doing this? I was, because, Mom, I can't be a therapist. I can't come home with everybody else's problems. But what I learned from psych, perception is so key, and perception is relative, especially when it comes to voices. Okay. Human learning. We learn in 3s and 4s. That is just a fact that was borne out by the change of phone numbers. My phone number as a little boy was DI 29062. And somewhere in the early 60s, it changed to 342 9062. Okay. So if you watch old movies, I'm at state 12550. No,
yes.
You okay?
No, I remember that from when I used to VE966, was it VE96652?
Okay. So what happened is that they realized that people would rather have an easier time remembering 3 numbers than 4 numbers versus 2 and 5. Life is grouped in 3s and 4s. You watch a promo for a show, they will give you an intro. They will give you a second plot point, and then they'll give you a funny tagline. 1, 2, 3, button. When you're doing a car commercial, when you introduce that there's a sale, they'll probably give 3 cars. This car with $1,500 cash back. This car with low down payment. This car now with the hybrid function. Then they bring it into the home stretch. They don't do 9 copy points in a row, even though sometimes it feels like it when you hear it.
Yes.
But and I have to tell you, I use it in commercials, and I surely use it in narration as a narrator to look at how somebody has put certain points in a scene to find the beginning, middle, and end. So psychology probably has helped me as a coach as well as a talent in the areas of memory, of perception. And then when you talk about fears, behavior modification, there are ways, to find a way to move beyond that. And, we just have to take the chance and risk. Like you're standing next to a voiceover icon and you're nervous like crazy. Well, my response was not to shrink. My response was to use my nerves and suddenly be so on the spot because I did not want this actor who will remain nameless, who's an icon. He's still alive. He's retired, but he is one of the most iconic VO guys of all time, but also one of the testiest. And I knew that if I made a flub, if I did something off, if I made a mediocre choice, he was going to ream me behind the microphone. He loved doing that. And he got away with it because of who he was at the time. So I think everybody can respond differently to challenges because you know what? You talk about psych. I'll tell you what I like to use in psych. Why is it, Cheryl, that you can have, and I'll just throw it out as a number, you can have 50 great sessions and you mark it on your calendar. This was a good one. This was a good one. This one, and then suddenly number 27 was a stinker. Why is it that we remember the stinker and not the other 49? What is it about human nature that it does? Because sometimes people pull themselves out of a funk. You have difficulty pulling themselves out of a funk, kind of like Major League Baseball players when they're going well and then suddenly they're in a slump. And everything, they're overthinking it. They're thinking of changing their swing or whatever, and they're psyching themselves out. So I think we have to be confident in our abilities. We have to almost put a little, I like to call it an invisible barrier around ourselves to say, you know what? I'm going to go in and I'm not going to let distractions get in my way. And distractions could be, in the old days, when I say old days, maybe I'm talking about pre-pandemic. If I go into San Francisco to do a session in person, which doesn't happen as often as obviously years ago, because we can record remotely. But when I went in to do a Clorox campaign about 3-4 years ago, you had the producer, you had the copywriter, you had the creative director walking around, you had the sales rep, and you had somebody from Clorox and the engineer. So you get all these people, and suddenly you could begin, wow, Mount Olympus is there, or Mount Rushmore is there. What am I going to do? You know what? You have to stay focused. I try to keep my eyes focused on my copy. And when I have to make contact because I'm responding to someone's direction, I'll try to laser focus on the eyes of the person who is speaking to me and not somebody else there who might be on the phone and they're ordering lunch
and not talking about you.
Right.
And
someone shaking their head left and right. And they're not shaking their head left and right about me. They're shaking their head left and right that they don't like the artwork. So I try to stay orally connected when I'm in a session, whether I'm in person or here, to psychologically protect my own self-esteem.
I would imagine that the people who study with you are a very revered coach and talent, Thom. Not that I need to tell you that, but I would imagine just to get that nugget, what you just shared right here, is gold. Because you mentioned one person from Clorox. There's sessions where you could have the job justification day where 13 people from the company come, and in addition to all the aforementioned people, and how to stay focused, and what you said about rising to the occasion when you were working with that other talent, that takes an awareness of who you are and what you bring to the table. And I would imagine that you share that with your students. And to walk away with that and take that into your next session is almost, in my opinion, worth more than even working on the copy, because it is such a head thing when you walk in that booth and you have all these people staring at you.
Well, thank you, because I agree with you. I mean, this is not false modesty talking. Do I have pertinent information to share about how to make a narration better? Skills? a promo better, even a commercial better, okay? Dig deeper for a character, etc. Absolutely. But when I'm working privately with someone, they're not afraid of the other 12 people sitting in the class. They're not going to be embarrassed by any of them because they're one-on-one. They say things to me that maybe they don't even say to loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
But they definitely don't, and they go, I want a bitch. I need a bitch. I go, bitch, get it out there. Get it out there. And yes, I have to be a little bit of a cheerleader to say, you have got to value what you offer. People say, I keep being told I need to be more authentic. Because they're saying, what they're saying is that you matter. Your point of view matters. And if you try to go for a cardboard cutout point of view, whether it's a McDonald's commercial or whether it's a promo for Law & Order SVU or a documentary about Charles Manson, if people don't hear your connection to that material and your point of view about why you think this is so good, why this is so interesting, why this is so memorable or informative, if you're more concerned about getting the words right and not sharing your point of view, that will be noticed. It'll be noticed because the person who doesn't care and cares more about his or her point of view, they're going to say, wow, she was different. Wow, she owned that. Wow, I felt like she was just talking to me because she bought it and she wasn't afraid to express it.
Given that we're on this topic, I want to follow the line. I was going to ask you this later on, but I would love for you to speak to your colors of your voice technique.
Okay.
And how you've taken what you just shared and what that means in someone's body or in your other concept of think visually and act vocally exercises.
Colors, simply put, is a way for verbal left-brained people to be less analytical and more creative. That's really where it comes from. If we think more of color and how color affects us, we will probably look at those words and not be concerned about how we pronounce it. We will associate those colors with particular experiences. So I created an arbitrary scale that was partly what my experience was with various colors, what I thought various colors in my mind sounded like or felt like. But also, I was fortunate that my younger cousin Dan was working at an ad agency because he was really a killer artist. So killer that eventually he got out of ad agency and he became an art director on movies, and he was the production designer on Days of Our Lives for nearly a quarter of a century as well. But Dan, I said, every time I listen to a spot and I hear a particular voice, I feel like I'm seeing certain colors that seem to go along with it. And they go, well, sometimes it's vice versa. Sometimes we pop colors into the shot because we want people to feel something specifically. If we want it to be earthier, we're going to make sure it's surrounded with, we could tell the guy, sorry, your shirt's too blue. It needs to be sort of a raggedy blue. And you got to make, and forget the blue jeans. We're going to put you in a pair of brown pants, things like that. So I started coming up with my own scale around it, that you could think of certain phrases that would remind you of these colors, and then a list of where the colors radiate in your body, whether it's in the head, whether it's in the mask, whether it's in the diaphragm, whether it's kind of lower, kind of along on the side of the side of your thigh or something like that as you lean up against the wall, because that gives it kind of a brown indifference to it, or red is this dynamic color because it's red basically says, I like it and I just got to tell you about it. It's unabashed enthusiasm. So I came up with all these different advocacy statements, some that are very bright and some that are very understated, depending on the color. And so it works in conjunction. But some people say, so when I'm doing a 60-second spot, do I start out, I think it's going to be blue, but then I'm going to turn green, and then I'm going to go, no. Now you're getting too verbal and you're not being in the moment. Here's the truth. Don't even think of colors for a second. If you look at a spot and you say, oh, wow, this spot is just so nurturing and reflective. All right. Now, in my mind, I call that a hybrid of orange and green, but that's not the point. If we forget colors for a second, if the spot starts with sort of this hybrid of a nurturing and reflective individual, as the copy unravels, Cheryl, we have different layers to the story. The longer we talk, the more the story unravels, more colors will be naturally introduced. So I look at colors as a way to get you out of the gate with something more specific, with something a little more memorable, something a little more emotionally grounded. So that's why I've been teaching it for years. And trust me, I wouldn't be teaching it if because I still run into people and they'll walk up, they'll say, hey, you know what? Guess what? I was on a spot the other day and I used my aqua, which is not in the spectrum specifically, but you see, he got his own hybrid there. And there's a gentleman by the name of Chuck Caruculus at Voice Tracks San Francisco. And he had been a student of mine for many years through Voice Tracks, and he would engineer my classes because he loved colors. And I'm sitting down and I'm listening to somebody do 6 different tags, and I wrote down this color. I think this person's doing gray, green, red, white, pink, whatever. And then I look at Chuck's list, gray, green, white, pink, black. And I realized Chuck got it. Chuck understood it. Chuck had executed. So guess who teaches the colors, beginning colors class at Voice Tracks now? Chuck.
Shout out to Chuck.
Because he nails it and he knows it and he gets it. But colors, like any other technique, some people say, oh, I took a workshop about the Meisner method for 6 months and it was just horse manure. Well, you know what? Not everyone connects to this.
Yeah, it didn't speak to them.
Right. It didn't speak to them, Cheryl. Absolutely. So it's just a tool. And if somebody says, gee, I'm really sorry, Thom, I don't get your colors. And I go, move on. I don't care how you get it. I just want you to get it.
Yeah. It's a
meaning
tool.
Your vehicle to delivering a good performance.
That's beautiful because colors do affect us. I mean, my studio is red because I like coming in and having the energy.
There you go.
And someone else will have very cool colors or warm colors and everything that you just said. And it makes perfect sense to me. But sometimes when you're putting things into actually going from intellectualizing it to doing it, it's a whole different thing, which you have discovered with your students.
You have done that on your own to get you in a space which you felt you needed the red for no other reason. You don't have to over-articulate it, overanalyze it. You needed the red.
Thank you.
And that's all there is to it. And I can tell you that in terms of people say, well, how often can I use colors, or is there any other thing that I can do to make my colors better? And I say, just think, not all blues are straightforward blues.
Mm-hmm.
We have light blue, right? Sky blue. We have aqua. We have midnight blue. We have Kelly blue. We have sapphire, right?
Yeah.
So, when people say, well, blue is just logical. No, it's not just logical. And I've got different adjectives or modifiers, but it's in a basic zone, colors that are in a basic zone. But our goal is to not say, here's my red, here's my yellow, here's my blue. We want to make sure that they got the right little shade that represents who we are.
Thank you I feel like I'm getting coached here. It's a free session for anybody who's listening to this episode.
Well, I have to tell you, and it's very sweet of you to say that. One of the biggest compliments I had was from a particular student who, let me just put it this way. And I'm just going to use her initials because that's what she goes by. Okay. LC. That's what she goes by.
Mm-hmm.
And LC is so bright. And also so inventive, so creative, so out of the box, so much of a risk taker. And she says, I want to get this colors. And I said, LC, you're colorful without this. She goes, no, I want the discipline. I want the nuances. I got to dig deeper. Sam, Samantha Paris, Sam told me I got to dig a little deeper. And so she did. She started working on her spectrum, Cheryl. So in other words, you're violet. might be different from LC's violet because her voice naturally is more middle register where you have some nice resonance and natural sensualities. In other words, your canvas, in my humble opinion, probably has quite a bit of violet on it to start. Okay. LC's might be a little plainer. It might be, I'm going to say it might be like a light red and a green, but she worked very hard on that. And then she surprised me one day with a little laminated wheel to where I could, in fact, I've got one up here. So here we go for audio effects. Okay. What do you hear right now, Cheryl? I spun something.
Yeah,
exactly. So she made a little plastic spinner so I could have a fun exercise in class of, okay, you have to read this tag doing silver, that type of thing. But then she took it another step because she's very, very, very artistic. She made a plaster of Paris little wheel that's about—
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know. It's about 7 or 8 inches in diameter with all the colors on it and a wheel. And it was so terrific. And she goes, I want to give you one. I said, no, this is too much. I said, what's your favorite charity? And she says, Santa Clara Audubon Society. And so I said, great. Well, I'm going to donate to them. Well, she ended up making about a dozen of them. And I teach an advanced colors class. The last colors class, 7 people ordered through LC their little color wheels, and all of them sent a donation to the Santa Clara Audubon Society. So win, all the way around there. But I've always been just knocked out the height of flattery by, let me just say, a brilliant student who I worked very hard with to help. When you have a great horse, right? If people go, wow, what a great horse. Great horse. This horse is going to be great, but he's got to be trained, or she's got whatever. I looked at her as a great horse that needed to be broken, but I didn't need the spirit to be broken.
Oh, that's so rich. Tom, could you please say that for the people in the back of the room?
Well, it's simply put, you don't want to kill the spirit of a thoroughbred. You have to be able to control the thoroughbred in the turn. And by the way, I'm using all this language, and I'm not really a horse race guy, but
it's okay. You could have fooled me.
But, but someone like her, I didn't want to take away all of her spontaneity and joy and the fact that she could move through copy very, very quickly, sometimes too quickly. But I said, you know what? There's going to be times where there's going to be spots where you have to move along in a frenetic fashion. And the joy of the spot is people have to pay attention to what you're saying, or else they're going to lose you. Mm-hmm. Especially when you have such passion in your voice, they're going to care to not lose you, as opposed to disclaimer, when somebody goes, participating stations only for a limited time, that kind of crap. So anyway, that was maybe one of the ultimate compliments that I got from her. And then I think the other one was from a guy who was, I'm going to use his full name, Mark Rattery. And Mark is an artist himself. Really very nice, laid back, cool voice that, again, didn't want to make him too slick, because he was coming in the early 90s in a time where we said we'd love something different. We saw like something laid back, but someone who's naturally sounds cool. And he does sound cool. He also sounds good looking, and he is good looking. One of those kind of guys, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, you could just hear it coming through. Anyhow.
It's not a radio face.
Exactly. It's not a radio voice.
I just want to digress for a moment, because you grew up in Los Angeles. So did you listen to KMET?
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to out anybody. It would be terribly rude to do that. But there was a DJ on there that my sister and I would just listen to him and go, this man has to be gorgeous. He just has to. And we actually saw him and we went, oh, wow.
I know. Trust me, you're absolutely right. A face for radio, as somebody used to say.
A face for radio. Yes, exactly. So I didn't mean to.
The mighty met.
KMET.
Yeah. So Mark, I was in a studio in San Francisco. This is when I had moved up here. And I was in person at the best studio there called One Union, which I always still love going to. Anyway, so I walked in and I saw him, and I hadn't seen him in like 3 or 4 years. He goes, what are you doing here? And I said, I moved up like 6 months ago. And he goes, well, that's really cool. Hey, don't get away. Guess what? I'm the voice of 24-Hour Fitness. And I said, congratulations. So are they going like in a real cool thing? He goes, no. I'm using my red yellow guy. And he goes, Pinto, and I'm fooling him. And I just,
I love it.
yeah, it's funny. I hadn't thought about that moment now for years, but Mark, God bless him. I mean, that was like, you know what, to know that somebody had an account for a couple of years and put some money in the bank and took care of student loans or whatever it was. That was fun. Now, you mentioned the Met, and I know I'm going to go off topic here, but it won't be long. Okay. So you said I started out in radio, right? Get out of radio. Never. No one's ever going to have me go back to radio. I'm not doing radio. And I'm not doing radio imaging. Oh, you should be doing radio. No. Come on, Pinto. You should say 99.7 the water. And I go, no, not doing it. Last year, my agent called me from New York, and he says, hey, there's a guy over at Sirius XM who would like you to do a demo. He's going to pay you to do a demo for their classic vinyl channel. I said, really? How do you hear me? He goes, well, I told him to listen to your demo, because you're of the right age bracket. And so he listened to your commercial demo and didn't hear anything necessarily, but then he heard your narration demo and he loved the opening piece. And I knew which one it was. It was for a paranormal thing that I had done for the Weather Channel called American Supernatural. And so basically it was this guy. And so basically he wanted me to just, do the classic vinyl, channel 26, that type of thing. And that's what I've been doing for the past 8 months now. I've been doing, it's like once every other week where you get a bunch of stuff where you have to come in and do liners, or they're having a special, like, for example, it was a Carlos Santana weekend, and then there's the Memorial Day coming up, or Led Zeppelin 50 years of Houses of the Holy. So here I am, as Pacino says in Godfather 3, every time I think it pulled me back in. But you know what? I enjoy it because
I was going to say it's our era, or
yes,
we're a little
the
almost
music,
a decade apart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There you go. So it's that, and then on top of it, they got Earl Bailey and Meg Griffin and Rachel Steele. People have been on the air for years, then they're doing their stuff. But I'm mostly doing the narrative wraparounds of little interesting stories about, it could be a simple setup like, Pete Townsend recalls when Keith Moon, their iconic drummer, passed away. It could be something like that, very simple to kind of set up. So here we are. We come back full circle, except my full circle voice was an homage to Mark Elliott, who just passed away last year. And Mark Elliott was the voice of Disney for so many years, but he was a midday jock on KHJ. And Mark just had this beautiful, clean, warm, friendly sound, just like this, that kind of thing. And I ended up in radio into being more of a midday guy, even though I wanted to be a morning man. But the midday guy, because Mark Elliott was straightforward, clean, what have you. And I ended up being the voice of Disneyland for about 2 or 3 years when they said, Mark's getting a little old, a little long in the tooth. Who would you recommend? And he goes, get Thom Pinto.
Aren't those wonderful to have
Mark,
that kind
Mark was just, because I told him when I met him, and then would go up to his house because we would talk about things, and he'd have little parties and all that. And I said, I impersonated you for so long in small markets. And he says, oh, that's okay. Radio isn't totally a bad thing. I have my own decent memories of it.
I'm biased, obviously, since I grew up in Los Angeles, but we had fantastic radio stations. We really did. And what you were describing that you're doing now reminds me a lot of what Casey Kasem did in setting up the history of a song or the history of a group and giving you background that nobody else was really doing.
And think about how Casey was not your typical DJ sound. He had, in fact, his program director, who was Chuck Bloor, the late Chuck Bloor. He just passed away a couple years ago. But Chuck Bloor was the program director of, I don't know if it was, I'm trying to remember if it was KFWB. And, they were trying to get, Casey to be a little bit more like this. But, but Casey just had that thing, coming in at number 11 on our countdown.
That's pretty good.
But no one sounded like him.
Like him. No, they didn't.
So there you go. I mean, that was, and so whatever, laughing all the way to the bank on the huge contracts for, American Top 40.
And they're still playing, I think it's The Wolf up here. They're playing Casey Kasem on the weekends.
That's right.
So I want to ask you, Thom,
Yeah.
because, and I ask this from time to time from the people who are joining me, depending on what we've been talking about, but because you have experienced really great success in and being at the top of your craft, it's easy to think in looking from the outside that you wouldn't have gone through challenging times or you wouldn't have faced your own fear in your career. And so I'm wondering, outside of your training, because we talked about your degree, is there a skill set or faith that has pulled you through those times?
Well, I can tell you that there was a lull that I hit. Hard to pinpoint the year, but I'm just going to throw a dart and say maybe 1991. Okay. And I had been going great guns since I signed with SBV in late 82. Okay. But things were starting to change a little bit, and and there were more actors starting to do it. And somebody would say, you sound a little too announcery, or they would say, you sound a little too old to be doing this, fast food spot type of thing. I mean, maybe I was 40 something. That point is that I'm going, okay, well, what am I supposed to do? And I was still making money doing promos, but that's when I had to say, okay, if I'm supposed to do something else, I mean, my own faith, which is, I'm just going to say, combination of cafeteria Catholic and Church of the Religious Science, because my mom subscribed to it for a while, like a lot of ex-Catholics do. I mean, I just decided I needed to know what my truth was, what I was supposed to do, and not fight it. Don't fight the universe. And I have to tell you that I think I started to embrace that I'm going to be a more mature voice, that I'm not going to work that much in animation anymore, that if I'm going to do more promos, it's going to be less comedy stuff. It'll probably then start to be more dramatic, or in this case, it was news stuff. And then probably by 1993, I started narrating some of the first shows that were on, well, it wasn't TLC then, it was called the Learning Channel. But anyway, we've got to get out of those valleys and we can't linger in them, and we have to be willing to be open. Okay, so here I am, I'm a coach. Who else can I work with? Well, there was a great casting director by the name of Martha Mayakis who always told the truth, and I did well at voice caster. So I said, I want to do some privates with you, because she never minced words. And she, helped me to be honest with myself about where I'm at. There's a phrase that I use a lot with people from time to time. I go, blah, 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 Disneyland. I go, for me, that ship has sailed. Selling a wireless plan to somebody, that ship has sailed. There are certain things that nobody wants to hear a person of my voice, my age bracket, talk about. Accept it, and move on. My motto has been the last few years, I'm staying in my lane, but I'm staying in my lane with gusto.
Ooh.
And I've always been a bit of a chameleon, so I still get some things that are a little offbeat where my agents go, we're going to send you a little something, because they're kind of looking for a voice replacement for Jeff Daniels on this trailer there. They need like 2 lines. And I go, I'm not sure I do Jeff Daniels, but if you got the MP3, and I'm pretty good at listening. So I get an opportunity to do some other things still, but generally speaking, I know where people are going to want me on commercial stuff these days, as opposed to 30 years ago. I accept it.
And so with that in mind, how would you say the business has moved in a positive direction, or do you have concerns about the direction that it's going?
I have concerns about AI, major concerns about AI. And I'm not happy with, and this is a call out, I've got a lot of friends who are passionate union people who are on these boards and do stuff, and they work very, very hard. And then you wonder, why hasn't something been done? Well, the problem is that non-union has become okay. And so somebody will say, well, the hell with that. We're doing this Volkswagen commercial, and we're going to use a sample voice. And so once that has opened, once Pandora's box has been opened like that, kind of hard to close it. I can tell you this, not from a selfish standpoint, but I truly believe this. What I do most, or what I love in terms of TV narration, no one is ever going to replace a TV narrator with an AI voice.
No, I can't imagine that.
A 15-second spot for Xfinity Wireless, yep. That kind of stuff is going to happen. And I'm concerned about AI. I'm also concerned about the number of people reading for the same copy, that there needs to be some acceptance of an attrition. And I'm not trying to tell people to get out of the business, but I am. I'm saying, how much money are you really making? How much money do you really think you can get? And, you're happy that you're doing these non-union spots and you made $20,000 for these 10 commercials that you did and you were able to put your kid through school. And it's like, do you realize that those spots would have been $150,000 if they were union?
But do you think Pandora's box will close? Do you think that the genie's going to go back in the bottle, so to speak?
I don't think the genie's going to go back in the bottle, but I do think that the unions are going to have to increase the limits on pension and welfare contributions on celebrities, because we seem to have I don't know if it's a microcosm of society. You know how we say we've got rich people and we got poor people, and what happened to the middle class? I'm going to say what's happened to the middle class actor, whether it's voice or on camera. So throw out a name. If Tom Hanks does a movie and he's making $10 million, just using that figure to start, okay, there's a cap at, I think it's $200,000 or $250,000 in terms of the health and retirement contribution that is made on his behalf. But if we've got fewer and fewer union people doing the scale jobs, the solvency of the union, which provides, in my humble opinion, one of the best health plans for the money, bar none. I dare somebody to come up to me and say, my health plan is better than yours and costs less. If you do, I will say my hat's off to you, and that's great. I've got a terrific retirement plan that I'm looking forward to taking here in a couple of years, okay? I didn't have to put a cent into that. That was done by the producers. If you made $1,000 gig on a non-broadcast thing, then they're paying like whatever it is, 16%. So the $160 goes into the retirement fund. It's, people talk about, I need a savings. I need a retirement. I need health. Union, this is what the union is all about. So I just feel bad that certain people are looking at, well, I made $80,000 last year doing e-learning, which is great. But e-learning is not a union thing, and also agents don't want to deal with it. And there's more and more e-learning, and that's just fine. But I'm more concerned about broadcast, also the use on social media, and there is, union scale on that. But there's a lot of people that are just trying to bypass that. It's not like I'm playing, I remember the days where I walk into a voice caster and it was one of 25 people and I knew I had a shot at a national spot. And now it's 500, 700 sometimes on a couple of casting outfits. Those are astronomical numbers, but those aren't just the old farts talking. I'm saying the younger people are just saying, God, I never book anything through there. Well, because there are a crazy number of people who are reading for that. So eventually you think some of these people say, I think I'm going to do something else with my life, that the cream would rise to the top. But for some reason, the structure now between union and non-union is not allowing the cream to rise to the top, because so many people say, producers say, I just want it done cheaper. Sorry about the lack of uplifting message.
Well, I asked you. There's no right answer here. I asked you. You are a veteran of the business. You have a lot of experience and a perspective that people coming into the business, even the past 5 years or so, don't have. So I'm curious, on the flip side of that, though, Tom, what makes you hopeful?
What makes me hopeful is that there will be enough coaches out there to push good talent to become great. So they will stand out. There's a lot of mediocrity out there that gets away with mediocrity because of the rate. Well, I'll tell you what, if you're going to, you can fill in the number, whether it's $300, $500, $400, whatever figure it is, okay? For, let's say, 2 radio spots. It's 2 radio spots and we're going to pay $300. Well, even some non-union talent aren't going to do that. But if the non-union talent who knocks it out of the park, who is heads and shoulders above the others of doing a casual conversational read, those people are eventually going to be paid more money. And those people are eventually going to be lured by the fact that, guess what? Join the union, because this talent agency will sign you. And it doesn't have to be Atlas. It doesn't have to be CESD. It could be any agent like Stars in San Francisco. They've got union, they've got a non-union division, but those people can start making that money and realizing their value, their true value there. And one of the reasons why I do the VO Roadshow with Mary Lynn, Mr. Howell, Townsend Coleman joined us on some promo, Sissy Jones on video games. We're trying to push good people to be great. That's what it is. Good people to be great.
Can you speak to the VO Roadshow for a moment? What is the VO Roadshow?
Well, basically, instead of somebody saying, you got to go to New York, or you have to go to Atlanta for this, or you have to go to Chicago, or wherever the conference is going to be, we're smaller groups, but we go to different cities. The VO Roadshow has been I know Marilyn and Jeff did go to London, but we've been to New York, we've been to Boston, we've been to Orlando. Now, I didn't go to Orlando, but I'm just saying that all the different people. Yes, we've been to LA. Obviously, we don't want to deny them. Been to San Francisco, been to Portland, been to Seattle, Chicago. So we come to you. We rent a studio, we figure it out. And so you're not renting a hotel. You're not airfare, to go to a particular conference and all that. So that's kind of what we're doing. And again, we do multiple coaches depending on the market. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3, depending on not just the number of people we get, because we always get 12 or 13. That's really what we're trying to do. But if certain things, like, for example, we wouldn't do video games, animation, and narration in the same one. It just doesn't blend as much. So like Scott Parkin was going to be before, it was sold out, but, we had COVID. Scott Parkin was going to be doing improv, and Sissy Jones was going to be doing video games. So there's a very creative crew together.
Now, aren't you going to New York now in September for that?
Yeah. And that's going to be commercial. It's going to be improv. It's going to be TV narration. But we're also going to be, not just working on documentaries, but we'll be working on reality series. So a lot of good commercial people can cross over into that thing. And our little bonus is going to be that Jeff Howell is going to be doing some work back in New York at that time. And so he's going to kind of be a roving ambassador that day in walking the halls, answering questions and talking about different things. And so we're really looking forward to that, to doing that again, because we found a really good studio last time, and they're still open, thank God.
Well, whoever is in charge of your graphics and your logo, it's a fantastic one. And I can't wait for you guys. First of all, I'm really looking forward to the time that I can join you live in the VO Roadshow. And
and they had San Francisco, but again, COVID thing got in the way.
Yeah, well, that's a reality that we're going to be dealing with for a while, and it's an ebb and flow, and we just have to figure out how to craft our life through that, or around that. But I think you guys need some swag because it's a fantastic logo.
Oh, what's Mary? I have to be honest with you. I don't know if Marilyn came up with it, but she facilitated it. She worked with the graphics designer and all that stuff. But we had some swag in Atlanta. We had buttons, and we've got these little stickers. And what's really great, I said, well, God, honey, I got all these stickers and whatever. And then she goes, why don't you put it on your suitcase? Because you got all these black suitcases going on the carousel, and I go, which is mine, which is mine, which is mine. And then I go, there it is. VO Roadshow.
What's VO Roadshow? That sounds interesting. That's a great idea, actually. But no, I'm talking about swag, like T-shirts and satchels.
I think, I think that's probably down the road, because what we're doing is we're working with groups of 12 or 13. It's not like it's a conference of 400. So,
right. I know. And so there's a cost involved, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
But I'm going to float that up the chain.
You talk to the top powers that be.
I happen to know the top powers pretty well. So I'll let you know. So gardening, I need to compliment you. Because it was just the other day. You posted a hybrid rose that I want. It was like mostly white and then pink on the fringes, on the ends of the petal.
Isn't it gorgeous?
Oh, I want it. I want it.
So, Tom, here's a secret. It's not my rose. It's in the McDonald district. So for the listeners don't know, we follow each other on Facebook and we'll compliment from time to time on each other's gardening prowess. And some of it is mine, but the roses that I've been posting lately are not. And it's funny that you asked about gardening because when I originally reached out to you and asked you about some of the topics you might like to chat about, you said, you live in Sonoma County, talk gardening. So I love that you mentioned that. But if you want it, I know where to snip it, and maybe you can get some seeds from it.
Oh, I don't want to get into trouble.
No, I wouldn't do that. Are you kidding?
And it was really funny because the photo that you took, you maybe used portrait mode. Mm-hmm. There was this beautiful, rich purple in the background, and I was like going, ooh, what do they got going on back there?
Yeah, that is a beard. I think if we're talking about the same photograph, which I believe we are, it's a bearded iris in the background.
Okay.
So, and
I'm big on salvia. Salvia here in the Central Valley, it takes a lot of heat. Which is great. I mean, yes, you have to water it, but it doesn't like go, Yeah.
That was you thinking, what was it? Hold on. Thinking visually and acting
vocally.
Vocally. There you go. If there was a soundtrack to your life, Thom, what would be on it and why?
God, I love music and I love soundtracks. And there have been different times in my life where different kind of songs. I was in a period of time where I was listening to Shawshank Redemption over and over and over again. And as it turns out, here we go, self-analysis, sad period of my life. On the cusp of a divorce many years ago. But the music always makes me feel. But if I were to say the good soundtrack of my life, if you just run an endless loop of Joe Cocker's Feeling All Right and the Eagles Take It Easy, I'll be just fine.
Okay. And it doesn't have to be happy because music, much in the way that you talk about colors, evoke all those different emotions.
Yeah. And then what I would put in between, because it always gives me hope, is Joni Mitchell's Amelia. Sort of her homage to Amelia Earhart, and It's so beautiful. And by the way, Mary Chapin Carpenter and Sean Colvin do an outstanding duet of that particular song.
Oh my goodness, the two of my favorites. I haven't heard that. I will have to look at it.
You know what? They are, boy, I wish they had hooked up years ago because what a duet they are in terms of the balance of their sounds and everything.
I will definitely have to look that up. Sean Colvin was out here about 10 years ago at the Robert Mondavi Winery. Maybe it was a little bit longer than that, but it had to be because, and I'm having a brain fart, the person who opened for her is a huge artist now, but it was just Sean Colvin and her guitar. It was acoustic set. And it was so beautiful. Mr. Pinto, I've really enjoyed myself, and I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk with me and share your warmth and your colors and your knowledge with the audience. And I would love for you to tell folks how they can get a hold of you.
My email, I am not a big fan. People say, well, my friends on Facebook, Messenger has so much spam. People, by the way, if they can't remember my email address, they can get my email address from my website, which is thompinto.com.
Okay.
And maybe they should just go to the website first and they can, they'll hear my VO work, but then they'll read a little bit about what the coaching stuff is. I don't have rates or anything on there, but then my email address is there. And if they want to go further, then they go from there. But I only do a certain number of private lessons in a month. And I will say, and it comes off hoity-toity, I don't mean it to be, but my first priority is to take care of talent who are signed with agents who their agents have said, would you please work with him or her on this or that or whatever. Then I work with other people who are signed with smaller agents, and I would say maybe that's the core of people that I work with. And yes, every month I try to work with one or two people that are a little raw, but maybe have potential and they came recommended from somebody else. Maybe they've got a great story and I would like to help them because they've got a great story, something they've overcome. And I'm trying to do some good juju in the world. But speaking of good juju, thank you for all you spread in the VO community yourself, Cheryl. And
Thom, thank you so much. I I'm really humbled and touched by that. I can't tell you how delighted I was that you agreed to be with me. And yes, anybody listening, he is definitely busy. I've had Thom scheduled for about 3 months now. So the fact that the universe conspired to bring us together today, you don't have to apologize for anything. It's wonderful. And is there anything else that you want to say or share before we say goodbye?
I don't know. I think I rambled, so
It's okay. I'll have fun editing. That's all right. I'll have you in my ear the whole time.
You know, you're sweet. I just appreciate people maybe just listening to. I give a lot of tough love, but I think emphasis is on the love as opposed to tough. Okay.
Okay. Forget about it.
Forget about it. That's right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'd also like to thank the following news outlets for the use of their clips in so aptly painting the picture of the fear that we're facing during this pandemic. BBC, PBS, Now This, UNESCO, and Some Good News. I especially want to thank Joel and Luke Smallbone, otherwise known as the Group for King and Country, for allowing me to use an excerpt of their song Together, which could not be a more hopeful and inspiring song for such a time as this. Finally, I'll leave you with the following from Proverbs 23:18. Surely there is a future, and your hope will not be cut off. Thank you again for joining me today. Feel free to offer feedback or a story idea at 19stories@soundsatchelstudios.com, via Instagram at CherylHollingVO. I look forward to sharing more stories on the next episode of 19 Stories from Fear to Hope. Until then, stay healthy and hopeful.
Together with our differences, together we are bolder, braver, stronger.